So far in this chapter, as we've been working with color and applying fills and outline colors to various objects, we've been using the color palette over here on the right-hand side of the screen. Well, there's a couple other ways to apply colors. One is to select a color, sample it from one object, and apply it to another. But we can take that a step further here in CorelDRAW X4 and even borrow object attributes and transformations and so on. So that's what we're going to do in this lesson. We're going to start here with this file called eyedrop1.cdr. So if you've got the exercise files and you want to follow along, check this one out in the Lesson 6 folder. It's a 2-pager, and I'm on page 1 here, where we see the eyedropper and paint bucket tools are about to be introduced. So here we've got 2 stars. One, a plain yellow star with a black outline. This one over here you can see has many effects and attributes applied to it. It's a little bit distorted, rotated. It's got a special fill, a drop shadow in the background. Lots of things have been done to this star. No wonder this guy wants to be a twin. So we're going to use the eyedropper tool first to borrow a color from one object to apply to another. If I want the exact color that I see down here applied to this star, well, then I might want to use my eyedropper tool. The eyedropper tool is the 4th one down. It's on this flyout. You can see when I hold down this button, I've got 2 tools, the eyedropper and the paint bucket tool. Both of these are used together. The eyedropper to sample the color or the properties, the paint bucket to apply them. So we start with our eyedropper tool right here. Now up at the top in the property bar, you can see we have some options here from this drop down. Do we want to sample object attributes, which would be outlines and fills? If there's text in there, that would also be one of the attributes. Any transformations like rotations and sizing. A lot of effects that you see in that other star, for example, would be considered object attributes. So we're going to start with the other option, sampling color. With that selected, you can see we've also got the ability to sample from a size, sample size, 1x1 pixel sample, a 2x2, or a larger sample. So when we start sampling colors from a photograph, if you want to narrow it down to one specific pixel, this is your choice. If you want to select color from an area, you can go as high as 5x5 pixels. I'm going to leave it at 1x1 and click OK. And I'm going to come down here and just click in this blue box down at the bottom where I see the eyedropper and paint bucket tools text. I want to make sure I'm on the blue. When I click, I know I've selected the blue if it appears down here next to this little paint bucket, my fill color. So with that selected, now I switch tools. So I'm going to go back to my eyedropper, click and hold, select the paint bucket, and now with that color selected already, all I have to do is go inside my star, and when I click, there we go. We've applied the selected or sampled color. Now that still doesn't quite look like this other star, does it? That's just borrowing color. Let's go back here to our eyedropper tool. So I'm going to click and hold my paint bucket and select the eyedropper from the flyout. And we're going to change this now to sample object attributes. Now you can see we've got properties, transformations, and effects. Each of these has its own drop down. If I go to properties, for example, do I want to borrow the outline, fill, and any text inside that object? Well, there is no text, so I'm going to deselect my text. I do want the outline and the fill. Under transformations, if we click this, if it's a different size, we can apply the same size, the same rotation, and the same position even, which would create another duplicate right in this location. So I don't want to select the position. I'm going to keep them separate from each other. So with those 2 selected, I can go over to effects now. Look at all the effects that can be sampled or borrowed from one object and applied to another. Perspective, envelopes, blends, extrudes, contours, lenses, power clips. These 2 at the bottom, drop shadow and distortion, were applied to this object. Now there is a whole chapter discussing these interactive tools and applying effects, so you'll be able to do exactly what I've done over here with this star. But for now, we're just going to borrow those attributes by selecting their checkboxes and clicking OK. Now when we click on this object, we'll be borrowing all of those attributes that we just selected. We go over to our paint bucket. I'm going to click and hold, choose the paint bucket tool, come inside my star now, and when I click, watch what happens. Beautiful. Slight rotation, a distortion. You can see the same color fill. There's a drop shadow in behind, and they're almost perfect twins. Now obviously if I wanted a perfect duplicate, I could have just taken my object and duplicated it. But it could be a different shaped object, for example, and you want to borrow all of the attributes from one object and apply them to another, just like we did. Another option is to borrow color from somewhere else. I'm going to go back to my pick tool here. And I'm going to deselect to see what that looks like. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go on to page 2. If we click the page 2 tab here, you can see the lynda.com logo, the trademark yellow across the bottom, but there's a little call out here. Lynda says, I'm not too keen on this shade of yellow, and that's because it's not the right shade of yellow. It's yellow all right, but it's not the shade of yellow that we're accustomed to seeing with the lynda.com logo. So where can we find the actual color used with the lynda.com logo? How about the lynda.com website? Well, it just so happens I've got my browser open. I'm going to go down to my taskbar here and click on that to show you that's the yellow we're after, a totally different shade. So the first thing I might want to do is just go up here and restore this down to a size where I can see both my Corel Draw page and my web page. I'm going to do the same with Corel Draw. So just between the minimize and the close buttons, I'm going to click restore down. Now you can see I've got these two side by side. I'm going to size this down even further over here, and I don't need such a wide docker for my hints. Okay, so I can see them both now. All I need to do is go back to my eyedropper tool, select the eyedropper. Now, if you can't see it, just drag your bottom border down a little bit so you can see all of your tools in the toolbox. And with my eyedropper tool selected, I have to make sure I'm selecting color, but from somewhere else. So I'm going to change my object attributes back to sample color. And from where? From the desktop. So when I choose select from desktop, now I can go over here. Notice I still have, in another application, my eyedropper tool. So I'm going to click on this yellow. It's now selected down here. I can see it right next to my fill color. And when I go back to my eyedropper, click and hold, select the paint bucket and go inside this rectangle and click, I now have the right yellow. Click the close button here. I'm going to maximize Corel Draw, clicking the maximize button, and now I know I've got the exact right shade of yellow. It has to be, it came from the official lynda.com website. So I'm going to go back to my pick tool, make sure nothing is selected to see the end result. That concludes our lesson here on using the eyedropper tool in conjunction with the paint bucket tool to borrow not just color, but attributes as well. And not only from within your Corel Draw file, but you can also borrow colors from elsewhere. Have fun using the eyedropper and paint bucket tools.